Kia ora, good morning, welcome to Connecting the Dots podcast. I'm sorry it's been a while since I've done one of my historical grief investigations. I've just been so busy working on my products, doing my investigation, getting my story out there, networking with people. The response that I've been getting for my candles and spray has just been phenomenal. And I've been working on 2 missing persons cases back home in New Zealand. Connected to human trafficking and of Indigenous women. So I've been working with friends and family of the missing women to help them kind of put puzzle pieces together as to what happened to these 2 girls. So I've been having to deal with all of that. But today I'm here. And I would like to talk about a case that I had briefly touched on before, but I'm now revisiting it because of I had incorrectly connected this case to Jack the Ripper, which after I revisited my Jack the Ripper case, it took everything for this case on a whole new angle. So I will put a link in the description box below of the original video I did, but this is a recorrect and a revisit of the Dahlia murder, the Black Dahlia murder, because in my first little video I had connected it to, likened it to, Jack the Ripper and a connection to the Illuminati. And I want to change all of that. I'm not above correcting my mistakes like I did with Jack the Ripper. When I've researched it properly, it's actually a little bit embarrassing, those original, I called them Mystery Inside History videos, but I've now renamed it to Connecting the Dots, Historical Grief Investigations, because it's like I had, when you're in the Matrix and you're going through an ascension, you think you know stuff, but not everything is made clear to you because you'll rely on the word or facts of other people to tell you what to think. And you have to kind of step away from all of that and learn to think for yourself when you step outside the matrix. So, if you see the last couple of videos I put up, I have been planning on doing these shows that I'm getting ready to make. When my boys and I hit the road, I want to go to these locations. I want to do these investigations. I want to research the paranormal, the urban myths and legends, the supernatural, and that with my boys on the road with a film crew and a security crew and that, and just head out and go to as many countries and as many places as we can where I do what I do as, a historical grief investigator, as a time jumper, as a high priestess and Indigenous shaman, and, speak for the victims, speak for time in history, basically, to try and add another point of view, add a different dimension to what is already known about these cases, either like globally, nationally, locally, community based in that, as well as, helping private citizens and private companies and all of that, and then using my products wherever we go to show the public how to use them so that when they are ready for sale, to go up for sale, people will know how to use them, show them how they work, teach them why they work, and help kind of remove the negativity that is attached to, and the darkness that is attached to these crimes or these incidents and accidents and disasters, and wherever death is, I will bring light. And then not only am I helping the victims be at peace with what happened, it removes all the negativity that was soaked up in the atmosphere and by Papa Tuanuku, by Grandmother Earth. It removes all of that. It raises the vibration, and it will protect everything, so that there's no paranormal activity, which means no gore hunters and false investigators and that going in there to profit or take advantage of situations for popularity, fame, clicks, likes, subscribes, that sort of thing. It's it's taking advantage of death and suffering and that, and I don't like that. So my products will help all of that. If there's anyone who has a house or a building or a business or whatever that is that they believe to be paranormally active in that, and they don't like the attention that it gets, or they want it to go away, then obviously they would bring me. I would investigate, do what I do, explain what it all is, so that they can understand what's going on. Leave my little products behind, show them how to deal with it all, and make it go away for them. So, as well as obviously, I want to be called to any parents who have children who are dealing with having visions and perceived, hauntings and that sort of thing, so that I can go in and sit down with the children, explain what they're seeing, why they're seeing it, and how they can get rid of it. Because unfortunately, um, a lot of these parents will automatically just take their kids to doctors who put them on medication and that basically is handing them a life of depression and insecurity and anxiety and fear and paranoia, and you know um, the contemplation of ending it all and that sort of thing. And the parents basically hand their children the downfall by choosing not to understand the science of what it is, the science and the psychology of what it is their child is actually going through. So, as an occult scientist, with developing quantum magnetics and all of that, I can go in and explain it all, using science and psychology and theology and understanding in that, based on, their principles and beliefs and all of that, to help the parents understand their children a little bit more and help give the children a voice, so that they can understand that they're perfectly normal. They're special and they're gifted, and it's a thing that all children are going to go through while they're going through puberty, because of the way that the chemicals change in the brain, and they're stepping out of their spirit to walk into life, um, and now more so than ever they need protection. So so I've been working on all of that, and I haven't had time to um, do my podcast. So this is a case, the Black Dahlia murder is a case that I had briefly touched on and got it completely wrong. And so I have to correct it, because now that I've stepped into my role, now that I have finished my ascension and I know where I'm going and I know what I need to do, I've got some mistakes that I need to correct, because it's not fair on the victims, and because, I may have pointed the finger at people who had no part in a lot of these cases, so I have to recorrect it. So the link to the original video is going to be in the description box, as well as, the links to other things that I found during my investigation. So I will try to keep this short, because it's actually quite cut and dry as far as I'm concerned. So Elizabeth Short, as we know, the Black Dahlia, was killed on the 15th of January 1947. And I know that the general consensus is that Dr. George Hodel was responsible for her death, that he may have possibly been a serial killer, because of all the other women that were killed under similar circumstances around the same time. And it's been bugging me. The one thing that always bothered me about Elizabeth Short's murder was how she was found. Dismembered at the waist with, the cut face. When you look at all the other women that were found kind of, beaten, strangled, that sort of thing, at the same time, the newspapers ran with, it's a serial killer and all that sort of thing, but her death wasn't the same as the others. She was strangled and beaten and that, just like the rest, but she had her womb removed, and she had, one of her breasts removed, which had always screamed to me law enforcement. Like someone had to have said to them, how do I explain it? I'm trying to be careful because it's YouTube, but there's only a couple of reasons why you would move a breast and a womb, and it's usually for forensics, medical purposes, or to hide evidence. I have always believed that her womb was removed because she was pregnant, and they were trying to get rid of evidence that she was possibly pregnant to someone who was very powerful. Now, the thing that you have to understand with Elizabeth's murder, as well as all the other women who were found in under similar circumstances at the time, is that the things that they have in common, all these women have in common, is either like the military, Hollywood, as in like, in movies, or, wanting to be actresses and that, and nightclubs and dance halls. And this is important because of the fact that George Hodel apparently was into S&M and partner swapping and, group intimacies and, like the O word, the big O word, having group O words and that sort of thing, which is why I think he was possibly mentioned and involved in this. Not because he was a serial killer, but because he was being blackmailed. The reason for this is because he was a venereal disease doctor, and as we know, syphilis was rampant at those times with the military. Now, Elizabeth Short worked at the base, the army base, and a lot of the men who were accused of killing these women, who were suspects rather, of killing these women were, military, ex-military, and these women would go to these dance halls and these clubs and meet these men. Some of them were mobsters, some of them were politicians, some of them were, Hollywood, some of them were like military elites, like generals and all that sort of thing. So these women all kind of moved in the same circles. There was a popular nightclub at the time that Elizabeth Short worked at where a lot of the women, I'm just, long story short, they were prostitutes. They were being prostituted out. They were being sent, to entertain these men, especially at this nightclub that a well-known mobster owned, that Bugsy Siegel was connected to. And this is interesting to note because Bugsy Siegel was actually a suspect in Elizabeth Short's murder. But how this is all tied in together is because George Hodel was a venereal disease doctor who was known for giving false positive syphilis results to people and charging up to $1,200 to $2,000 to do the tests. And he would say to them, "You've got syphilis," when they hadn't gotten syphilis. And I think that basically, if you look at, for example, it's well known that Al Capone himself died of syphilis. It's also interesting that you need to take into account that Al Capone himself died 5 days after Elizabeth Short. And Bugsy Siegel died 6 months after Elizabeth Short. And the person that they believe killed Bugsy Siegel died 3 months after Bugsy Siegel. Now, the reason why this is important is because it appears that Bugsy Siegel, who was a prime suspect in Elizabeth Short's murder, he basically, what happened was the Chicago mob, the New York mob, they were having a hard time in Chicago and New York, and so they wanted to try their luck on the West Coast. And so, Al Capone's sidekick, the one who was working on Al Capone's behalf, um, had gone to Jack um, Dragno. And was it Dragno? So I'm looking at my notes. Yeah, gone to Jack Dragno and said to him, "We're sending some men over to the West Coast. Bugsy Siegel, give him safe passage." Bugsy Siegel, he basically created Las Vegas, with the casinos and all of that. Bugsy Siegel is pretty much responsible for making Las Vegas what it is today. So they were like, okay, send them over, that's fine. Bugsy Siegel went over there and completely just tried to dominate the West Coast. He was, helping himself. He was the racketeering business and the bookies, and he was skimming off the construction costs and all that sort of thing. And he was treading on the toes of the West Coast mob, who had let them all in good favour because, out of respect to Al Capone. And Bugsy Siegel came in and was basically causing trouble, and he was connected to the Black Dahlia through the nightclub, through the prostitution, through all of these women. And he was basically just helping himself to things that he had no business helping himself to, trying to be the big man on campus on the West Coast. And it is believed that it was Jack Dragno who ordered the hit on Bugsy Siegel. Now, what you have to understand about Elizabeth Short's murder and the way she was found is that, and this is the thing that always never sat right with me, is that the way she was, dismembered at the waist and the cut across her face. Over here in the UK, everybody knows that cut across the face, which the Joker, Batman, the Joker, the cut across the face, it's called the Glasgow Smile. And it is a warning sign. It is a warning, basically sent out to keep your mouth shut. And the man who had been confessing to his friends and family that he had been responsible for the hit ordered on Bugsy Siegel, his name was Eddie Canizano. And he died 3 months after Bugsy Siegel. And obviously, he had been going around talking to people, "I'm the one that killed Bugsy Siegel," and then he died 3 months later. So he was killed because he was talking too much, and so he was basically made to shut up. And Bugsy Siegel was killed because of the trouble he was causing on the West Coast. He was trying to, muscle his way in on, the West Coast racket. And so he was killed and possibly framed for Elizabeth Short's murder to send a message to the Chicago and New York outfit to keep their mouth shut. Now, where George Hodel comes into this is because I believe that it appears that because of his propensity to have these big O's with these prostitutes and famous, rich, powerful people, the other women may have been killed through exuberance, like because he liked S&M, the strangulations, and that maybe these women were accidentally killed during the throes of lust and passion. And so to cover it up, they made it look like murders rather than, sex gone wrong. And then the media just ran with it or were fed stories that it was a serial killer and that sort of thing. So I believe the mob may have gotten Hodel involved in the dismemberment of Elizabeth's body because he knew how. It is widely acknowledged that the way it was done was very unusual, but was common at the time. The way the doctors in that particular area, when they were training, learning how to dismember bodies, to dissect them, that sort of thing. The way she was done, it was somebody who knew knowledge of a very rare technique that was used on the students at the time, but was then no longer used afterwards. And he was a medical student at the time that this technique was being used. So I think the mob basically said to him, "You need to help us prepare this warning. We're going to sacrifice Elizabeth because she's pregnant to someone who doesn't want to be a father to a prostitute. She was very, very popular. That's where she got her name, the Black Dahlia, from, is because she was very, very popular amongst men. She was one of the popular street women trying to make it in Hollywood. I'm trying to be polite. And so I think she got pregnant and they needed to get rid of the baby to help someone out, to protect their reputation. So they said to him, "You need to do this to send a warning shot," because there's only one of 5 reasons why, when you look at the forensic psychology of why somebody would dismember a body that way, and it also is connected to the Glasgow Smile, which, by the way, was something that only started appearing. It was something that only started happening after World War One in Glasgow. These men, these boys, and that they needed money, work, getting jobs, and that wasn't easy. So they formed these gangs. They were called the Razor Boys, and they used to go around and have these fights for dominance and petty crimes and that sort of thing. And they would cut the mouths of their victims and then punch them in the guts, that they would scream and split their face open, and that as a warning, like, keep your mouth shut, like, we rule this town, this is our patch, blah blah blah. This is, it's a warning to everybody else out there that we are large and in charge, sort of thing. But when you look at the forensic psychology of why people do this, there's only one of 5 reasons as to why somebody would dismember a body and do that sort of thing. And the 5 reasons are, for it's defensive, so it's to move the body parts, to make it easier to move body parts, also to hide identification. For aggressive, which is, for strong emotions, and, like torture and that, like they get so angry, they're so full of rage, they're so pent up with strong negative emotions that, they will hack and cut and, as a means of control and dominance in order to get their rage out. Which is what S&M basically is. It's like an inexcusable excessive force during sex as a means to control and dominate the person they're having sex with, because it's deep-seated, like, narcissistic, psychopathic rage coming out in the form of sexual aggression, which I understand perfectly myself as a victim of my ex-husband's sexual assaults on me after we broke up. That's what he used to do. He started, like, choking me and hitting me and trying to strangle me and all of that in order to achieve that sort of thing. And I would pretend to be asleep, and hope it would just go away, hope he would just leave me alone. So I can understand that. Before our marriage ended, it was getting bad enough that, like, he could only, like, he punched me in the face and actually split my tooth, which pressed up against the nerve in my jaw, and now I get chronic ear infections The dentist had to pull the tooth. But I still get ear infections to this day because of the nerve damage that was done. But so I understand that form of, like I know that side of it myself personally. Then there is there's defensive, aggressive, and then offensive, which is sexually motivated. So for people who, like how do I explain this without getting into trouble? People who are deceased, how there are a lot of people who are attracted to doing those sort of things to people who are deceased, and they will dismember body parts and that for sexual reasons, for fetish reasons. And then there's the psychotic, which is, the dismemberment of bodies and that because of psychotic episodes, because they lose touch with reality. And then the last is gangs, mobs. People will dismember bodies to send a message or warning shot to people not to mess with them, that they're not to be messed with. We own this patch, this is ours, take what we say seriously, or, you're going to pay the consequences. So they're the 5 psychological reasons as to why someone would dismember a body, which also ties it back to the mob, chopping her in half, sending a warning shot. It could have been, to say we're severing ties with our connection to Bugsy Siegel, we're severing ties with our business agreement, and we're letting you know that if anyone talks, we're coming after you, which is exactly what happened to Canizano. Casanano. Oh, God. I've got to write it down because I don't speak Italian. Canizano, sorry. He was talking, so they shut him up. So I think that they got Hodel involved because they had it over on him, that they knew that he had this fetish and that he was hurting these women that were dying during the throes of his big O parties. And they knew that he was ripping people off by lying about these tests and that. So they said, help us do this and pass this message on and we'll let you go. Now, the interesting thing is, remember I said that Elizabeth had a part of her breast removed. And I had always felt that it was because somebody had left a mark or left evidence, and someone in law enforcement or in the medical or forensics industry said you got to get, like, that's evidence. They're going to know it. Like, if this gets tested later on, they're going to know it's you, which means they got help from someone in law. I was convinced of it, that somebody in the police department or in law gave them a heads up to remove evidence, which, with the way forensics is today, and they were doing it back then, like if she was bitten and they made impressions of the teeth marks and that with any of the suspects, they could have absolutely have identified who her killer was through bite marks. And, like they left shoe imprints on some of these women's bodies. And, if you're talking about S&M, biting and strangling and hitting and punching and slapping, and that is very, very common. So I had always felt that somebody in law enforcement had said, cut off the breast to get rid of that evidence, because it can, it will be traced later on, because this sort of stuff was, starting to come into scientific recognition back in those days, doing, plastic casts of people's teeth. And I mean, it's how they were able to help identify Ted Bundy. So now the interesting thing is that Eddie Canizano, who claimed to be the one to kill Bugsy Siegel, there was a Warren Hill who was the executive assistant to Nevada law enforcement. he apparently rang the PD, and basically he was telling people, Canizano isn't connected to this, you need to drop it. Like, there's no involvement with him in this Bugsy Siegel thing. Just drop it. Like, we've looked into it, it's fine, drop it. So it was dropped. But a lot of people believed that Canizano did kill Bugsy Siegel. Now, the interesting thing is that Warren Hill, Canizano was married to the cousin and best friend of Warren. Oh, I said Hill. It's Hull. I apologise. Warren Hull. Eddie Canizano was married to the cousin and best friend of Warren Hull's mother. So it's very possible that it was Warren Hull or someone connected to Warren Hull who was telling them how to get rid of evidence, i.e., get rid of that bite mark on her breast. So they chopped the breast off, There is no connection to any kind of cult. I spent hours upon hours trying to find cult connections. A lot of people said it could be a Luciferian thing, but I've found no evidence of that. All evidence points back to the mob and a cover-up and sending a warning shot to the Chicago and New York, the Chicago and East Coast mob. You did us dirty by sending Bugsy Siegel over to come and try and hustle in on our racket, and we don't take too kindly to that. So we're going to sacrifice one of our prostitutes who's pregnant to somebody that he doesn't need her to be pregnant to, and we're going to frame Bugsy Siegel for it. Point the finger in his direction. We're going to get Hodel involved because we've got stuff on him to keep him quiet. And then, we got to take out Canizano because he was talking too much. So I don't think it was a serial killer. I don't think Hodel did all of these killings. If he is involved in any of them, I don't think it was on purpose. I think that it was all to do with these big O parties he was having with the women who were being passed around like a joint, to all these men because they needed money. They wanted to make it in Hollywood. They possibly, these men had things on these women. A lot of these women were in abusive relationships with military men and that who were suffering from PTSD. All these military men had the syphilis and they were going to people like Hodel for their tests and treatments and all of that. So it's all connected. And basically they used these women for their wild parties. And then when things got out of hand and these women were maybe perceived dead, because it could be very possible that, because it is with one of the victims who was found in the field, the woman who could fly the planes and that, it was believed that she was still alive when her body was dumped, and that she was then killed at the scene. So it is possible that they thought that they'd killed a lot of these women during their, sexual exploits, and then it turned out that some of them weren't, so then they had to finish it off, and then to cover up that, there were these military people and these doctors and rich and powerful men and mobsters and that all having these big O parties and sharing all these women and getting syphilis, and that some of these men were mobsters who were ripping off other mobsters and causing trouble for them, and possibly threatening their positions of power and money making, and that they had to start silencing people. So 5 days after Elizabeth died, Al Capone died. So then that kind of I think made them feel a lot more comfortable with taking out Bugsy Siegel, and then of course having to shut Eddie up because he kept talking about the fact that he was the one that killed Bugsy Siegel. So it was all an elaborate scheme, I think, where Elizabeth Short and the other women were basically the fodder for a mafia game, for a mafia power struggle. And Hodel was brought into it because they had things on him, they had dirt on him that could, ruin his money making scheme and all that sort of thing, and that, they had help from Warren Hull to help cover things up. And then they fed things to the media so that, they would take it on a different tangent, to divert attention away from, the true reason for it, which was to send a message to Chicago and the East Coast mob that they didn't appreciate sending Bugsy Siegel over to cause trouble. And so it was a warning shot to say, don't do it again, or, because we mean business. And I think that it was brilliantly, pardon the pun, executed. I think it was what they did was brilliant. How they did it was brilliant. Genius. Mastermind. Genius, because like 70 years later, people are still thinking it's George Hodel and serial killers and that sort of thing. And I think it was just a small group of very intelligent, well-connected mobsters, who pulled off probably one of the most elaborate murders in world history, who will never ever be held accountable for it. And you have to give credit where credit's due. The fact that they managed to divert attention away from them the way that they did so skillfully, and let people like George Hodel take the fall for it, kind of subconsciously, although, while there is some proof that he is involved, he's definitely connected. You can't look at the evidence and say he's not connected, but I don't think that he was like a rampant serial killer who went around killing all these women. I think that he was just a man who had these fetishes and that got out of hand, and they possibly helped him, cover a lot of things up, in exchange for, holding his racket, his syphilis racket, over his head and that. And then when the time was right, they said, we need you to help us with this Elizabeth Short's thing, because mobsters and gangsters would know that the Glasgow Smile and the chopping in half is a clear signal to say we're severing ties and you need to keep your mouth shut about, what you're seeing with all of this. And it's exactly what happened. And as far as I'm concerned, it's bloody genius. Absolute genius. I mean, I obviously I feel sorry for the women, and it is absolutely no excuse for what any of these poor women went through. A lot of them were mothers and that as well, which is just horrible. But when you allow yourself to be put in that kind of situation, if you're not careful, you don't know what you're walking into. And I have always maintained from day one that I've never ever judged prostitutes, because you don't know their story. A lot of them are just trying to put food on the table and pay bills. A lot of them are drugged and forced to do it. A lot of them are trafficked, and emotionally manipulated and abused to do it. Kidnapped, which is the crimes that I'm working on in New Zealand at the moment with Brianna and Michaela. The general consensus is that Brianna was kidnapped to be human trafficked, that she was, going to be used for that kind of similar, same sort of thing. But she was a strong-willed young woman who was determined not to be treated like that, and unfortunately, it's ended where it has. But it makes me sad. It bothers me as a woman that there are so many women out there so desperate to make money or to be famous, to be the next Hollywood star, to be the next whatever, that they're willing to compromise their health and their safety in order to do it. And it's these women, these victims in the Black Dahlia murder, and we should say Black Dahlia murders, because while she was the Black Dahlia, she wasn't the only victim. Um, their deaths need to be a warning to the women out there who are wanting to be famous, who are wanting to be, stars on social media and in Hollywood, and that do it through talent. Don't compromise yourself by, being in the wrong crowd and doing the wrong things, because, you could be the next victim. And I don't want to have to talk about you on my next podcast. I'm trying so hard as a woman to be a leader, a positive female role model for young girls and women out there on how to conduct yourself, how sometimes getting what you want can take a long time and it can be hard, and you'll have to make a lot of sacrifices and crawl through a lot of glass and, walk across lava and that in order to do it. But the result at the end, when you get to come out of that dark tunnel after that battle that you've just gone through to get your success or whatever, is so much more rewarding, knowing that you did it standing in your integrity with your morals and your virtues as your guide, off your own back and not through the help of anybody else that you had to sleep with or be bribed with or, treat abused by, in order to get it. Like, there's a right way and a wrong way. And I'm trying to show women and young girls how to do it the right way. So, it's a sad situation that a lot of these young girls and women put themselves through. Obviously, I'm not talking about the women who are kidnapped and where they're plucked off the street and pulled out of their homes and that. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the ones who know what they're doing, like, with the nightclub, um, that Elizabeth Short and, a lot of these women went to. They knew that they, in order to be these burlesque dancers and that in these clubs, they would have to apply for their job on the casting couch, so to speak, where a lot of them, then spread diseases and were shared around the other men and that. One of the nightclub owners that Elizabeth worked at, where it was known that a lot of these women went to, and where the women were dancers and that for these men, was frequented by Bugsy Siegel. So there is a connection to the Black Dahlia and Bugsy Siegel, and I think the mob knew that, and that's why that they, like, it's just, as far as I'm concerned, it's just genius. I don't excuse the death of any innocent person, but I always had a lot of respect for Al Capone and the way that he did things, because he did a lot of bad to people who crossed him, but he also did a lot of good for, people. Like, he paid for food and, educations and that for a lot of kids and people, in Chicago and that he didn't need to, and like in New York and all of that. Like, he did a lot of good where he donated like turkeys at Christmas time to like hungry families and all that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that he was an angel, and I'm not saying that he was a devil. I'm just saying that I respect and admire the way that he went about things, because while he was a very forceful man, he did not stand for the deaths of innocent people. And there's been a lot of documented cases where he took it very personally, where innocent people, especially children, were killed or hurt or injured in, gang crossfires and that. Shop owners and, where any innocent person was involved in the gang crossfire and that, he took it personally, and he would always compensate those people, by way of apology. He did, like, he had a lot of love for his people, and he took care of them that kind of way. And they got him on tax evasion for all the things that man did. They had to come up with, tax evasion to get him. And this man was making so much money. What he owed in taxes was like a drop in the bucket compared to how much money he had. And unfortunately, it was syphilis that got him. Apparently, when he died, he had the mental age of a 12-year-old, which is, is humiliating, a humiliating defeat, I think, for somebody who was such a strategic brilliant business-minded man. But that was the syphilis. That's what happens when, you pass yourself around and you don't check, the purity and virtues of the people that you're being handed. And it's always that kind of sin that gets you at the end of the day. So use protection. My God, use protection. Just don't, or just don't, like me. 2015 with my ex-husband, the one who punched me in the jaw. He was the last one. And I have kept my legs closed ever since. I have a husband in New York that I'm getting ready to divorce. But he never got that far. He chose the ones who couldn't keep their legs closed. I'm not. It sounds judgmental, but I don't know how else to say it. If you know my story, you know what I'm talking about. So I don't need to go over it again. But he chose the other path. I chose the path of virtue. He chose the path of vice. Put it that way. But if he's happy, mazel tov. I don't care. I'm rebuilding my empire. I'm basically taking the sticks and leaves and foliage of what I was trying to build, that I was talking about in those last videos, like the birth of the Eye in the Sky show. I'm taking all of that and moving it forward now, into what it's about to become, as well as my Connecting the Dots podcasts and stuff. So anyway, I'll put all the links to my evidence in the description box below. It's food for thought. You might agree with me, you might disagree with me. That's up to you. I'm just putting it out there. I like to just, throw out different opinions and options and, thoughts and that on the matter. History might prove me wrong later on, but for now, this is just what I think went down. And I hope you enjoy the podcast. And I'm sorry it's taken so long to do another podcast. It's just, I've just been mental busy, and I go where the priority is. And for me at the moment, the priority has been working on my products to get them all ready. And because I have to get them like trademarked and patented and get patents for them and that, so that when we do head out, like once we leave Yorkshire, we're going to go to Scotland for a bit to just kind of de-stress and unwind and prepare for our migration to North America. And I'm going to start making shows in Scotland. I've got a whole list of places that I've been discussing with my boys, and where I will start using my products to showcase them, give them time to be trademarked, and I'll have to get like a what do you call it, like a special kind of lawyer to help me, get all the paperwork in that filled out, so that I can protect my products through trademarks and all of that. And then once I've got all my little ducks in a row, then I'll apply for the visa to North America, and then we can head out and start making these shows in all the states of America and Canada and all of that there. And yeah, so I've been working on that, and also working with Brianna and Michaela's friends and family, trying to help them understand what happened to them and coping with it all. And it's all on my Facebook, it's all in my community box, it's all on my X account and that, so it's all there. And yeah, so I'll put links in the description box below, and I hope you enjoy the podcast, and I hope it gave you some food for thought. And until next time, I will speak to you later. Ka kite anō. Mwah.